Well, hello, I am Rob Broadhead with RB Consulting, and today we're going to talk about technology sprawl. Now, this may not be something that you have heard of, but you have probably witnessed it. I know we have many times, and it is where your technology gets out of hand in a business, usually a small business, sometimes a larger business. And essentially, it is when businesses get moving. They need to move fast anyways, but when they're in sort of like this growth phase, whether it's a startup, maybe it's right as you're about to go into some sort of plateau or getting out of a plateau. So if you're going from maybe a smaller company, you've been good for a while, and now you've decided you're going to go into this growth phase, those are the times you're most likely to end up in a tech sprawl kind of situation. And it's not easy to get out of. Basically, what happens is we grow quickly rather than smart. Instead of really thinking about the tools that we're doing, we're really more focused on just getting a tool, get it done, however we do it, because we've got problems that need to be solved, and they need to be solved now. We can't wait. We can't research. We're just not able to do what is our normal process for selecting such a solution or a tool. There's nothing wrong with this. It's just how things go. Some companies, some businesses, some leaders are just naturally wired so they don't have to do that. They don't have to think it as much. It's just part of their process. But that's rare. Most of us at some point just decide to choose expediency rather than anything else. It's basically, hey, that's a hammer. That's the closest thing I've got. So that's what I'm going to use. And so that means it's probably not going to be the most efficient. It may not be the best tool for the job. And honestly, when you chose it, you didn't really care. You just needed to get the job done. You didn't need the best. We'll talk about this later. There's sort of a Pareto principle there, which is the 80-20 rule, which basically says, hey, if I can in 20% of my effort gets me 80% of the way there, and that may be all I need. I may not need to get all the way to that 100%. And if I need to spend another 80% of my effort into that last 20%, then maybe I'm just much better off grabbing that first solution, that first tool. Now, with tech sprawl, what happens is we start grabbing these tools, and usually we don't grab the same tool over and over again. Or more likely what we do is we just replicate that tool. So the good example for that is a spreadsheet. We have a spreadsheet, and it's like, boom, throw your data in there. You can throw some calculations on it. You're ready to go. Okay, next problem. Let's just throw it in a spreadsheet. Next problem, throw it in a spreadsheet. Next thing you know, you got a whole bunch of spreadsheets, and you've lost track of where all those spreadsheets are and sometimes what they actually do for you. So this creates pain points. These are some things that you're going to suffer if you're in technology sprawl. Some of the things that you may find out that you're bumping your head against are that you have duplicate solutions or overlap of some sort, where you've got, maybe one tool does some of your work, but another tool does some other work, but they do the same thing in some cases. You'll see this a lot if you've got like a customer relationship, CRM type of solution, something like that, where there's going to be, they'll throw some extra little features on, and the next thing you know, particularly over time, you've got something that you got it for one specific use, but now it's sort of blurring into other areas, and your employees or your customers may be drawing you into those other areas. So now you have overlap. Sometimes your pain points because of this, because you've picked all of these different tools, is you're going to end up with these complex integration steps or copy paste issues where, for example, you've got these spreadsheets, but maybe you've got different versions of them. So they're not all supported under the same, like maybe they're not on Microsoft Excel. Maybe you've got some people out there that are doing things in Google Sheets or Mac numbers or something like that where, they're sort of the same and you can export and save as, but sometimes it's just easier to copy paste data into them, but even sometimes that doesn't work. All of these, when you get into these, the problem is it just doesn't scale. It was great for getting it done at the time, but it was not the most efficient. Maybe it was a little clunky. And so it's okay to be clunky if you're only doing this once or twice, let's say a week. But if you're having to do that 100 times a day because you're growing your company, then suddenly that clunky becomes a major issue. You can take inefficiencies in small doses, but when you start to grow those, when you start to replicate them a bunch and grow your company, so now you have to replicate those processes, those inefficiencies do multiply as well. particularly time consuming. There are these kinds of things that when you get into a technology sprawl situation, you just have a lot of time consuming processes to make them all work. It may seem simple, but it could be things as simple as I have to log out of this and then I have to log into that and I can't keep them both up, or I've got to switch machines, or I've got to switch screens, or all these little things that become time consuming processes because we now have to do them a bunch of times as opposed to maybe just once or twice. Or it's just grown on. So each time you said, oh, okay, I'm going to grab another tool. And maybe it takes another, let's say, minute to do the work when you add that. Well, if you've already spent, 2 hours in a process and it's like, oh, this is going to take another minute, then you say at the time, that's okay. I'll take that. But now when you grow that process, now it starts becoming, you keep adding those minutes and a minute and a minute and a minute. The next thing you know, this thing that you probably could have found a solution to get it done in, say, 5 minutes, now it's taking 15. And that's not actually an exaggeration. We've run into more than a few situations where there is what feels like it should only add, minutes or an hour here or there, tops over a week. Next thing you know, you're spending a huge amount of time just trying to make all of your systems work together. And sort of the last thing here, you don't really have the problem is you don't have a single system of truth or single view into progress or your process or your overall organization. You've got too many systems. You don't have a way for them to talk to each other. And therefore, you're having to build those. And then you maybe eventually have to build something out of it. But part of that, again, is because you don't have one place to go. And as you grow, that's a major source of pain in a lot of organizations because they have their truth of their system. The actual source of data exists in different places. And so now you can't really eliminate one. You have to figure out how to make them work together, which means you have to do extra work. Other things you can run into with this, and that are going to be problems, these pain points maybe you are dealing with today, but most likely are going to end up running into later, is going to be things like maybe you've got some bad license agreements. Maybe there's some stuff that you purchased that was, or you agreed to, or you subscribed to. They were great when you only had 2 or 3 users on it. But now you're changing your organization, you're growing. And so there is a vast hordes of people that need access to that information. And maybe they don't need to have all of the information, but depending on what the tool is, sometimes it doesn't allow you to, slice and dice that. Good examples would be things like financial information or HR information that initially it was okay because you only had 2 or 3 people using it. And they were all in the same office and they could talk to people. But now, if you need to grow to some sort of let's say a self-service solution where employees can look up their payroll information or something like that, if each person that does that, each employee that does that requires a new license, you can very quickly get from, hey, I only needed 3 or 4 licenses and that's not a problem, to I need 500 licenses, and that is a big cost. So things like that you can run into. Support and maintenance can also be a huge burden as you grow. Very similar to licensing is it may be that you had a couple people in the same office. So no big deal. You could have a tech person come in once a week. They could do backups and things like that. Or if there was a problem, they could address it. But now if you've got people spread all over and you've got now, maybe instead of 2 or 3 systems, solutions, technologies to support, maybe now you've got 15. If you've done a lot of one-off solutions, this is something we see a lot in the consulting world, is that over, let's say, a 10-year period, you went and hired 10 different consulting companies because they were the best for the problem you had at the time. Well, if each of them had their own way to go about solving the problem, their own, let's just say as simple as programming language that they used as their strength. You could now have 10 programming languages that are used to build your solutions and all of your different pieces. And that means you're very unlikely to get one consulting company to be able to come in and help. Now you're going to have to go out and find different ones, which means you have to spend time finding those people and finding the right people. And sometimes it's difficult or dead technology. So you just have too many technologies. And then you can also run into old versions and vendor lock-in where you've got something that was awesome 5 years ago when you first got this. exactly what you needed. But now you've grown and maybe your change, your requirements are a little different, but also that software may not have grown or that company could have gone out of business. There are all sorts of things that can cause problems, including even if they still exist, like say Microsoft. You could have bought something from them 20 years ago. Actually longer than that now, but 20 years ago you could have bought software from them. You got a solution, it was awesome, it was perfect, and it was exactly what you needed, so you didn't have to touch it for say 10 years. Then all of a sudden, the operating system it runs on, all of the libraries that it uses are disappearing because they are not supported. They're not secure. And so now you have to make sometimes a very big jump. And sometimes that's not even possible. It's not just an upgrade, it's a full migration to go to a new system at that point. So laid out a bunch of pain points here. So how do we deal with this? Well, really what you need to do is you take a look at what you've got. And we've mentioned some of these pain points like overlapping features and too many technologies and things that have changed their versions. And so it's going to take a little bit of time, but look at what your processes are. What is the process? What is the technology or technologies around it? Or what's the vendor that's involved? Just give yourself essentially even a laundry list would be a huge step. Because then what you can do is look at it and say, okay, we have this sprawl. Now, what is the highest priority area? Where is the biggest pain? Where is our biggest, whether it's financial cost or time cost or just headache cost of that area? So let's go take the things that we want to solve first. And from there, we can look at that and say, all right, where is there duplication within there? Let's try to essentially pick one. I admit, this is a oversimplified summary of how to move forward because sometimes you can look at the duplicate areas where there is functionality in two systems, and then you have to figure out, okay, if I'm going to remove it from one, how do I do that? Because now where I was at first, if it's system A and system B have overlap, I used to be able to rely on data in system A being in this, we'll say this murky area that has overlap. And then when we were in B, we had the B data that was in the overlap area. But now if we're going to eliminate one of those, that means, for example, B, when it gets into that overlap, if that's the winner that we choose, now we have to pull data from A into B in some way. But we want to look at these things because right now let's identify where we want to make some changes. And sometimes that's one of the biggest things is if you've got system A and system B and there's overlap, who do you want to win? If you're going to remove it from one or the other, sometimes the hardest part is figuring out where do we want essentially our system of truth to exist now? Because that, yes, has a lot of downstream impact, but first, we've got to choose one. And that can be difficult because you may have some other areas where there's not overlap and you don't want to lose functionality. And this is why this is something it's going to take a little bit of time and takes usually several iterations because what you want to do is you want to get in there, you want to get rid of the overlap, you want to get your systems integrated where you can, and then where there's a lot of manual work, find ways to automate it. So you almost, if you think about it as a big pool, you're actually going to be diving down in several areas across that pool because you're going to pick a section, you're going to clean it up, and then you're going to basically rinse and repeat. You're going to go on to another one. Now, it may be that you aren't going to be able to actually clean it up. It may be that you take that example I used, system A and system B, and you say, you know what? There's this new thing that didn't exist 5 years ago, system C. It's awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop A and B, and we're going to move it all into C. That is far more common than you would expect, I think, because software solutions, this modern technology is moving so fast. It is very common for you to have something that is an excellent solution 5 years ago, 10 years ago, sometimes even 3 years ago. But now the market has changed. The solutions that are out there changed. The technology has changed to a level where things that didn't exist before or that were very difficult to integrate into a system, to build into a solution, are now second nature. And so that thing that solution that you thought wasn't going to cover your needs 2 years ago now has all of those features in there. There's a lot of upgrades you can do in software over a 2-year period, depending on how aggressive you are. So sometimes it's finding that new solution. With all of this, we're just talking really now about now, today, where are we? But looking forward, let's try to make decisions so that our solutions are not going to get us back into this situation next year or 5 years from now. Now, we know that part of the problem was we were moving too fast. However, there are some things we can do, and this is usually where you see bigger companies don't have this as much, even though they may not move as fast. The thing is, they have standards and procedures and processes for growth that say, this is, for example, maybe our technology stack. This is our list of preferred vendors. And if you want to go out of the preferred vendor, that's okay, but you need to build a case for it. So we don't end up just saying, this is the easiest solution. We may say, this is the easiest solution right now, but you do invest a little bit of time, and you have just some checks that don't necessarily take a lot of time, but say, hey, do you really want to do that? Because this may cause us problems down the road. And if so, give a reason for it. And it can be very complicated or it can be very simple depending on how the organization wants to do it. But when you're looking forward, you want to look at things like lock-in. You do not want to get into vendor lock-in if you can avoid it. You don't want to have something, particularly now with cloud solutions and things like that. You don't want to have a situation where all of your stuff, all of your intellectual property, all of your customer lists are sitting on somebody else's systems, basically, where if they go out of business or they don't like you, they can keep you from it. A good example from a few years ago was a social site that did some stuff. They were all Amazon, I believe, and I don't want to drop names with them, but I was just like, we'll pick them. So they were all, I believe it was Amazon, which makes sense. Great company, love them. However, all of their stuff was there. Everything was there. And they did something to tick off Amazon. And I can't remember what, I think they basically went against some of the terms of service. And so Amazon said, nope, we're done with you. Totally possible, totally feasible, particularly if you've got, if you're a company that's growing and you've got some employees that get in there that aren't right, that are, maybe doing something a little shady or something like that. There's just all these little things that could come up. So, and it could be that the company goes out of business too. So there's all these things that are not impossible. So avoid lock-in where you can. You don't want to go nuts and have sprawl, but you also don't want to go down to one usually. Although there are areas where you can do that as far as maybe not in a vendor, but definitely with a technology type. So you could do a Java stack, say, or a SQL Server stack or something like that. Even though, yes, you've got these, some of these are too big to fail, but you can go in certain areas where you can have a nice silo. So the people that are working in it don't need to know 15 different technologies, but also you're not locked into a specific vendor. Now, the other thing is you just want to, in moving forward, reduce and simplify your tools and technologies. If that's not always, for lack of a better term, in the back of your mind as you're moving forward, then sprawl will happen. It's one of those things. It's like, if you don't have an intentional way forward, then it's way too easy to grab that tool that's going to be just a quick and dirty, and then you're back where you started. So have as your focus, I want to reduce, simplify, integrate, automate. And then with all this it's like, look at the Pareto principle for solutions as well. Because it may be that we can't get from the sprawl we have today to what we really want anytime soon. But where you're making changes, where you're making improvements, it will snowball as well. Because you'll find that suddenly, hey, I don't have to spend as much on my license. All my license agreements, or there are vendors that I can drop, and money that I was spending that I don't have to spend. There was time I was spending that I don't have to spend. There were all of these technology challenges that we had to tackle in 15 different areas, but now we can tackle them in one instead of doing it 15 times. There's all those little things that the savings will add up. In summary, take a look at your solutions and your systems. Right now, as I'm doing this, it's around the beginning of a new year. That is like a perfect time. Just like you do financial audits sometimes every year, you will, and you definitely will, somewhere along the way you're doing your annual finances because you have to file your, do your year-end taxes. Same kind of thing with technology is just periodically, you don't have to do it every year, but I would say no less frequently than every other year. Just sort of sit down, get your team. If you don't know it, get your team to just say, what are our processes? What are we using to solve those problems? And look at the list. Where can we simplify? Where is there a potential overlap? Where are there things that are just very manual that maybe there's a way to automate that? And even if your team doesn't know it, just identifying that, hey, this is an area we can maybe make an improvement is a step forward, because even if you don't have the time or the finances to do it now, at some point you will. You'll get to a point maybe where things are going better. And you say, hey, this problem has been there long enough. Let's address it. Overlapping and duplicate effort is a huge cost, particularly with a technology sprawl, because typically what happens is there's no automated integration. It's all manual integration. So the keys of knowing that you'll have this, the things that you'll hear are things where, oh yeah, well, they enter it there and then somebody else reads a report and then enters it into this other system or types it into this other system. There's not an automated thing. It's if your people are not technologists and they know that the data goes from point A to point B to point C and can tell you how it moves there, you probably have technology sprawl. It means it's probably very likely manual. Because otherwise, if it's done right, they're not even going to know that the data even moved. They're just like, I open this up and I enter my stuff. I open that up and I enter my stuff. They don't know that, and then I have to take that data and I have to enter it over here. Or then I have to print a report or walk this over to them or send them an email or all of those kinds of things. Take a look for those, because that's where you're going to see that manual duplicate effort. And there's a great place to start to make your employees much happier, make them more efficient, and reduce your costs. Once you've got your list, prioritize and simplify. Just start whacking away at it. And it doesn't have to be overnight. Like I said, this is the kind of stuff that it is valuable to you, even if you get a little bit of progress on it. So build this up, get your list, prioritize and say, here's the things we want to tackle first. And then just look for ways to do it. And if you can't, if it's something where you don't have the knowledge, the skills, the technology, or whatever it is, then yes, you can always go find a consultant or an expert or something like that and have them take a look at it. Business process analysts are out there all over the place. There's a lot of places you can go to take a look at what you've got, or even to help you take a look at what you've got and then help you figure out how to prioritize and simplify into something that makes you what everybody wants to be, is just a lean, mean business that is in there cranking through stuff. Customers love you. Response times are awesome. Costs are reduced. All of those good things. That wraps this one up. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time. It is a frustrating thing to see. So anywhere that this has helped you consider that maybe there's some technology sprawl that you need to address, I am more than happy that we've shared this time. If you have any questions about this, send questions to rob@rb-sns.com. I'd be more than happy to answer them, to help you out, to point you in the right direction. You can always schedule a free assessment call with us on our site, and whether it's a 30-minute where we can just sort of talk about stuff, or if you want to go a little deeper, we can do that as well. We just want to help find a way to take technology and make it not the headache that it sometimes is. We talked about pain points. We want this to just be areas where technology helps you, not frustrates you. I know that's difficult these days, but there is a way to get there. Thank you again. Hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you next time.